Hi, my name is Jack Myers and we're here today talking about valve assemblies. And the valve assembly is one of the most important parts of your regulator. This controls your pressure and these parts are wearable parts, so you will want to replace them occasionally, okay? We have several different types of valve seat material. We have a Buna, which is the softest material. You can see it's black. On the back of your seat there should be a B that signifies that this is a Buna seat. Okay. The next hardest material is a poly red. You can see by that, and again on the back you will see a P. Polytan is the hardest material. Again, this information or this seat will have a P on the back. Polytan is the hardest material, and then the next material is your Viton. Viton is specifically for higher elevated heat. It is very heat resistant and it is the best for that application. Now, all of these seats are dependent on your differential going across the seat. We have a chart that we are including in this video so that you can make your seat selection based on the differential pressure from your inlet to your outlet pressure, okay? So one of the first things I want to do is show you a valve assembly. The valve assemblies are based on your flange size. So when you're ordering parts, make sure that you're ordering the parts specific to your flange size. It is not dependent on your ANSI. Your seat material is dependent on your differential, so you have to be cautious as you go up in your ANSI class that you may have to check your differential. Okay, now we're doing our 4-inch valve assembly. Now this is for a 3-inch standard wing valve. I wanted to show you a couple of things about the assembly and disassembly on a 4-inch. One of the important things you need to know is that on your 4-inch valve assembly you have what we call a stem extension. There are two different sizes, okay? You have the taller one, it is for your 57S. Your shorter one is for your 4-inch S's, okay, the flat case regulators. So make sure that when you're installing your valve, you've got the correct stem extension. When you order these regulators, they do not come, when you order these valve assemblies, they do not come with the stem extension on them. So if you do not have this proper stem extension, it will not, you'll have to make sure you order it as a separate part, okay? Because we're not going to know what you're going to be putting it on. So the first thing we're going to do is we've got our completed valve assembly. What I'm going to show you is the easiest way to take these apart and to put them back together. We have our Allen wrench. Now this size is going to be a 3/16 inch Allen. Okay, I do recommend having the longer handles on these. They are very useful when you're reaching inside those bodies to do your valve assembly and tightening it back up. So the first thing we're going to do is spin this off. You can see we have very free travel on the threads. This is very important. So we're going to take this off, and we're going to take this off. I'm going to make sure that's nice and loose. These fit snug sometimes, so it's very important to get that loose. Now, on the upper half of the valve assembly, you have got these flats. Make sure, again, that you clamp these in your vise on these flats, okay? So we're going to get that set in our vise here, make sure it's snugged up. Now, for these nuts, I just like to use a large crescent wrench, okay? It's easy. This is one of the things you can look for instead of worrying about the nuts on these having the right wrench at hand. So I I like to do these, okay? So let me snug that up a little bit more. And we're going to just take that off. Now, this nut is not a lock nut, okay? It is very important that you do not use a lock nut on the upper part of the stem. This is just a plain nut, okay? What happens is when you tighten your stem extension down on this nut, it will lock this into place, okay? So we're going to loosen this up a little bit. Most of the time these things come out fairly easily. So we're going to just drop that right out of there. And what I have found that oftentimes these stick to the surface. Don't ask me why. So we're just going to pry that off, okay? Here you have your O-ring again, okay? So it's very, very simple how to do this. We're going to set this aside now, and we are going to do the lower part of our stem. This is also extremely important. Make sure you do not mar any of these corners. It would really be good if you had soft jaws on your vise. If you do not, one of the best places to try to grab it is very high on this hex. The reason being, your movement in your bottom guide is only going to be about 1 inch, and it's going to be on the bottom part of this. It would be very good to have a file to make sure that you do not put any marks on this to ensure that you've got free travel. When you first start out on your valve seat, this will be all the way down to the bottom, and when you try to lift it up, you may have some resistance there. So make sure these surfaces are very smooth. So one of the things I'm going to do here, so I'm going to set that down. I'm going to snug that up, and we're going to use our adjustable wrench here. Again, now on this side, we do have a locking nut. Okay, so this again is a nylon locking nut. And this is again used so that any vibration from the regulator is not going to cause any loosening of your valve assembly itself, and make sure that you've got a good seal. Okay, so we're going to take that off. Okay. Now if you notice some darkness here on the bottom, that is again because of the moly coat that we use on these regulators. So we're going to loosen that up, and we're going to pop that down. Set that aside. And again, if you've got any problem where there's some resistance, you can just peel that off. Again, we have our O-ring. And just as a reminder, make sure that when you are replacing your seats on a stem, make sure that you do replace the O-rings with new O-rings, okay? So we're going to put this back together. Now if you notice, when I put it in the vise, you can see we've got a couple little marks here. Since we've already got marks there, we're going to put that back in the same position so that we're only going to have 2 edges to clean up. Also notice that I've put this up high in the vise again, and that is to make sure that we have a good surface seal all the way down on the bottom of your stem there. So we're going to put that O-ring back in there, and again on the bottom half of your stem, this is where you're using your nylon locking nut, okay? So we're going to put this back on. And again, we're just using our crescent wrench. Tighten this down just a little bit more. I don't want any kind of wobble while I'm trying to tighten this up. Now again, one of the things I like to try to do is make sure I'm going in a nice circular pattern and not putting any excessive torque on a vertical line coming away from that stem. You want to go around in a circle so that you are not doing any kind of damage to any of the threads. So again, we're going on nice and smooth. Like I say, I really like the moly coat on this. It seems better than any kind of the silicone or any of the other types of lube that we have. It's got graphite in it, and that graphite seems to work quite well. Now I've just snugged that down. I'm going to reposition that and snug that just a little bit. Now that should be good. Okay, I'm going to take that out. And again, we're going to repeat the same thing. Now, since we're on flats here and we're not going to be on a surface that is moving, it's fine to clamp these in. Just make sure you give yourself a little bit of height again, like we did before. And we're going to repeat the same process. We're going to set that in there. Don't forget your O-ring. Going to put our retainer on here. Now we're going to put our lock nut on it here that I have misplaced. Where's I got people off camera making fun of me now. Okay, we're going to take this now. This is just a regular nut. We know that we're just going to put this down here. Tighten this down. And we're going to just snug this. Okay. Now this is where we're going to be putting on our stem extension. We're going to put on the one for the 57S again, the taller one. You can see the size difference. Okay. So on a taller one, we're going to put a 57S. Now this will lock that nut in. We're going to give that a nice snug, okay? So we're all good on that. Now, on your next part here, again, this is the top of your stem. Now remember, since you're on the top of your stem, one of the best things to do is there is a split in this tightening ring, and there is a split in your upper valve assembly. Line those up. It's going to be very, very important to have those lined up. Okay, and we're going to snug that down, just snug, so it holds onto that stem. But keep those lined up. Makes it much easier when you're tightening the valve assembly and setting your valve to have those two slits in there lined up. Okay, now we're going to test to make sure we don't have any kind of issues. Make sure that's nice and free. Okay, so right now we're a little too tight on that ring. We're going to open that up to make sure we've got plenty of easy travel on that. Going to turn that up. Okay, we've got a little bit of resistance. Okay. So since we've got some resistance, what we're going to do is we're going to work this back and forth, okay, so that we're not going to have any kind of resistance. So we work this back and forth several times, make sure that we're going to be able to spin this on and adjust our valves to the proper length when we're setting our valves, okay. going to readjust this, get our slits lined back up. Open that up just a little bit more so we can get that slit up there. Okay. Okie dokie. So now we're all nice and free. We're not having any kind of problems now with our valve assembly. We're going to make sure that we give this a little snug. Make sure our slits are lined up. We're going to tighten that up just a little bit to make sure that the ring isn't coming down when we're installing it, okay? And we have free travel on this, okay? Now, when you are setting your valve in your regulator, you are going to really have to crank this set screw very, very hard to make sure that this does not spin. This is very stiff stainless steel, so please make sure that when you have your valve set that you really give this a lot of torque to close that ring so that you don't move, okay? Okay, that is it for our 4-inch valve assembly.